The gunshot that killed her father echoed through Teresa Wright's mind even now, 3 months later, as she stood behind the counter of the general store in Yuma, Arizona. Her hands trembling so badly she could barely count out change for the customer in front of her. The coins slipped through her fingers and clattered across the wooden floor, and she dropped to her knees to gather them, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. The customer muttered something under his breath and left without waiting, and Teresa remained on the floor, surrounded by scattered pennies, wondering how much longer she could pretend to be whole. It was June of 1884, and the Arizona Territory heat pressed down on everything like a physical weight. Teresa had turned 21 just weeks before her father's death, shot down in the street by a drifter over a card game dispute. She had watched it happen from this very window, had seen the blood spread across the dust, had heard her father call her name one last time before the light left his eyes. Her mother had died of fever when Teresa was 12, and now she was completely alone, running a store she did not know how to manage, living in rooms above the shop that felt haunted by memories, going through motions that felt increasingly meaningless. The door opened again, letting in a blast of scorching air and a tall man with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of storm clouds. He removed his hat as he entered, revealing dark hair that needed cutting, and nodded to her politely. Teresa forced herself to stand, brushing dust from her dark blue dress, trying to compose her expression into something that resembled normalcy. "I need supplies," the man said, his voice low and rough like gravel underfoot. "Enough for 2 weeks on the trail. Beans, coffee, salt pork, flour, whatever you recommend." Teresa nodded mechanically and began gathering items, her movements stiff and automatic. She had done this 100 times since taking over the store, but every transaction felt like she was moving underwater, disconnected from her own body. She placed items on the counter one by one, trying to calculate prices in her head, but the numbers kept slipping away from her. "You all right, miss?" the man asked, and there was something in his tone that made her look up sharply. "I am fine," she said, but her voice cracked on the last word, betraying her. He studied her for a long moment, those gray eyes seeing too much, and Teresa felt something crack inside her chest. She gripped the edge of the counter, trying to steady herself, but the room seemed to tilt sideways. She heard herself making a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob, and then the stranger was around the counter, his hand on her elbow, guiding her to the chair she kept near the back wall. "Sit down before you fall down," he said firmly. Teresa sat, pressing her hands to her face, mortified by her own weakness. "I apologize," she managed. "I do not know what came over me." "When did you last eat?" he asked. She could not remember. "Yesterday, the day before." Food had lost all appeal, everything tasting like ash in her mouth. She shook her head. The man looked around the store, then selected a tin of crackers from a shelf and brought it to her, opening it and placing it in her hands. "Eat," he said. It was not a suggestion. Teresa took a cracker and bit into it obediently, and to her surprise, her stomach growled in recognition. She ate another, then another, and the man fetched her a dipper of water from the bucket by the door. She drank gratefully, feeling some small measure of clarity return. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I have been managing poorly. I can see that." He pulled up a crate and sat down across from her, his hat balanced on his knee. "I am Harrison Hayes. Most people call me Hayes." "Teresa Wright," she replied automatically. "This is my store, was my father's store." "Was," Hayes repeated, catching the word. "Recent, 3 months ago. He was shot in the street." The words came out flat, emotionless, because if she let any feeling into them, she would shatter completely. Hayes nodded slowly. "And you have been running this place alone since then?" I have nowhere else to go, nothing else to do. Teresa looked down at her hands, at the cracker crumbs scattered in her lap. I wake up every morning and I think perhaps it will be easier, but it is not. It is only harder. I cannot sleep. I cannot eat. I stand here and I serve customers and I count money and I lock the doors at night, and all of it feels like I am watching someone else do it, like I am not really here at all. She had not meant to say any of that. She had not spoken of it to anyone, had kept it all locked inside where it could not hurt anyone else. But something about this stranger with his steady gray eyes made the words spill out like water from a broken dam. I am broken inside now, she said, and her voice trembled so badly she could barely get the words out. I do not think I can be fixed. Hayes reached out and took her hand in his palm warm and rough with calluses. The gesture was so unexpected, so gentle, that Teresa felt tears finally spill down her cheeks. She tried to pull away, but he held on. "Then we will fix you together," Hayes said, and there was such quiet certainty in his voice that Teresa almost believed him. She looked at him through her tears, this stranger who had no reason to care about her pain. "Why would you do that? You do not even know me." "I know what it is like to be broken," Hayes said simply, "and I know that nobody should have to carry that alone." Something shifted in Teresa's chest, some small crack letting in light where there had been only darkness. She gripped his hand like a lifeline, and for the first time in 3 months, she let herself truly cry, great gasping sobs that shook her whole body. Hayes did not let go. He simply held her hand and waited, patient as stone, until the storm passed. When Teresa finally calmed, wiping her face with her free hand, she felt exhausted but somehow lighter. "I do not understand why you are being kind to me," she said. Hayes released her hand and leaned back, considering his answer. "I was a lawman once, up in Colorado Territory. 4 years ago I watched my partner get killed because I made a mistake. I froze up in a bad situation and he paid the price. After that, I could not do the job anymore. Could not trust myself. I drifted for a long time working ranches, doing odd jobs, trying to outrun what happened. But you cannot outrun yourself." "What changed?" Teresa asked. "Met an old woman in Santa Fe who needed help fixing her roof. I figured I could do that much without messing it up. She fed me dinner after, and we got to talking. She told me that guilt and grief are heavy loads, and trying to carry them alone will break your back. She said the only way through is to let other people help shoulder the weight, even strangers, especially strangers sometimes." Hayes turned his hat in his hands. "She helped me see that I could not change what happened, but I could choose what to do next. I could choose to let it destroy me, or I could choose to live anyway, to find purpose anyway." Teresa absorbed this, recognizing the truth in his words. "And have you found purpose?" "Working on it," Hayes said with a slight smile. "Right now, I am headed to a ranch outside of town, the Double H. They hired me on as a horsebreaker, but I reckon I can spare a few days to help you get your feet under you if you will let me." Teresa shook her head quickly. "I cannot ask that of you. You have work to do. You are not asking. I am offering." Hayes stood and placed his hat back on his head. "Here is what we are going to do. I am going to finish gathering my supplies, and you are going to tell me what you need done around here that you have been putting off. Then, I am going to go let the ranch know I will be a few days late, and I am going to come back here and help you with whatever needs doing. And you are going to eat proper meals and get some rest." "Agreed." Teresa wanted to argue, but she found she did not have the strength, and somewhere deep inside, beneath all the grief and exhaustion, was a tiny spark of something that might have been hope. "Agreed," she said. Over the next 2 hours, Hayes helped her close up the store properly, something Teresa realized she had been doing haphazardly for weeks. He checked the locks, examined the roof for damage from a recent storm, and made a list of repairs that needed attention. Then he rode out to the Double H Ranch, leaving Teresa with strict instructions to cook herself a real dinner and go to bed early. She did, and though she did not sleep well, she slept better than she had in months. Hayes returned the next morning just as Teresa was opening the store. He brought fresh bread from the bakery and insisted they eat breakfast together before starting work. Then he spent the day making repairs while Teresa minded the store, and she found herself watching him through the window, studying the efficient way he moved, the quiet competence in everything he did. During a quiet afternoon lull, Hayes came inside to escape the brutal heat, and they talked. Teresa found herself telling him about her childhood, about her mother's death, about learning to run the store at her father's side. Hayes listened intently, asking questions, and she realized it had been years since anyone had really listened to her like this. "What about you?" she asked finally. "You said you were a lawman. Where are you from originally?" "Kansas," Hayes said. "Born in Abilene in 1859. My father was a blacksmith, my mother a school teacher. I have 2 sisters, both married now with families of their own. I left home at 18 to try my hand at law enforcement, figured I could make a difference." He smiled ruefully. "Turned out to be harder than I thought. You were 21 when your partner died," Teresa calculated. "The same age I am now." "Yes, I spent the last 4 years running from it. I am 25 now and I am tired of running." Hayes met her eyes. "Maybe that is why I stopped here. Maybe we both needed someone who understands." That evening, Hayes joined Teresa for dinner in her rooms above the store. She cooked stew with vegetables from the market, and they ate at her small table while the sun set outside the window, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It felt strange to have company, to hear another voice in these rooms that had been so silent, but it was a good strange. "Tell me about your father," Hayes said. "What was he like?" Teresa smiled, a real smile for the first time in months. "He was stubborn and opinionated, and he told terrible jokes. He believed in honest dealing and hard work, and he knew everyone in town by name. After my mother died, he raised me himself, taught me everything he knew. He wanted me to have the store someday, to have something of my own." Her smile faded. "I think he would be disappointed to see me now, barely keeping it together." "I think he would understand grief," Hayes said gently. "And I think he would be proud that you kept going at all." Teresa felt tears threaten again, but they were different now, softer somehow. "I want to make him proud. I want to do right by what he built. I just do not know how." "One day at a time," Hayes said. "One customer at a time. One morning at a time. You do not have to have it all figured out right now." Over the following days, a routine developed. Hayes worked on repairs during the morning, then helped Teresa with the heavier aspects of running the store, restocking high shelves, moving crates, dealing with difficult customers. In the evenings, they cooked dinner together and talked, sharing stories, learning each other's histories. Teresa found herself looking forward to these conversations, to the sound of Hayes's voice, to the way he made her feel less alone. The ranch sent word that they could spare him for 2 weeks, as the horses they needed broken were not quite ready yet. Hayes stayed in a boarding house down the street but spent most of his waking hours at the store. Teresa noticed the way other women in town looked at him, appreciative glances and inviting smiles, but Hayes seemed oblivious, his attention focused entirely on his work and on her. One afternoon, a week after they met, a drunk cowboy came into the store and started causing trouble, knocking items off shelves and demanding whiskey that Teresa did not sell. Hayes stepped in smoothly, his lawman training evident in the way he handled the situation, calm but firm, getting the man out without violence. After the cowboy stumbled away, Teresa found herself shaking. "That was the kind of man who shot my father," she said. "Drunk and angry over nothing." Hayes locked the door and turned the sign to closed, then guided Teresa to the back room. She was trembling all over, memories crashing over her like waves. "I watched it happen," she said. "I was standing right at that window and I saw him draw, saw the gun, saw my father fall. I ran outside, but there was so much blood, and he looked at me and tried to say something, but he could not. He just could not, and then he was gone." She was sobbing now, the words pouring out in a rush. "I have not been able to say this to anyone. Everyone in town knows what happened, but nobody wants to talk about it. They look at me with pity, but they do not ask, and I have been carrying it alone for so long, and I am so tired, Hayes. I am so tired of being strong and pretending I am fine when everything inside me is screaming." Hayes pulled her into his arms, and Teresa collapsed against his chest, letting him hold her while she wept. He did not try to quiet her or tell her it would be all right. He just held her steady while the grief poured out, and after a long while, Teresa felt something release inside her, some knot of pain loosening just a fraction. "I am sorry," she said when she could speak again, pulling back slightly but not quite ready to leave the circle of his arms. "You did not sign up for this." "Yes, I did," Hayes said firmly. "When I said we would fix you together, I meant it. All of it. The bad days and the hard moments and the grief that comes in waves, all of it." Teresa looked up at him, at the absolute certainty in his gray eyes, and felt something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with grief. She had known this man for only a week, but he had seen her at her worst and stayed. He had held her together when she was falling apart. And somewhere in the process, he had become essential. "I do not know what I did to deserve your kindness," she said softly. "You do not have to deserve it," Hayes said. "You just have to accept it." That night, after Hayes walked her upstairs and said goodnight at her door, Teresa lay in bed and admitted to herself what she had been trying to ignore. She was falling in love with Harrison Hayes. It felt impossible and too fast and terrifying, but it was true. He had appeared in her life exactly when she needed him most, and he was helping her find her way back to herself, piece by piece. The next morning, she came downstairs to find Hayes already at work, repairing the front steps that had been loose for months. She brought him coffee and sat on the newly fixed step beside him, watching the town wake up around them. "Hayes," she said carefully, "when are you supposed to start at the ranch?" "Few more days," he said. "Why?" "I will miss having you here," Teresa said, the admission harder than she expected. "I know you have work to do, and I cannot keep monopolizing your time, but these past days have been the best I have felt since my father died." Hayes set down his hammer and turned to look at her. "I will miss being here too," he said, "but the ranch is only 5 miles outside town. I can visit on Sundays, my day off, and maybe you could come out there sometimes if you wanted. The ranch owner's wife is a kind woman. She would welcome the company." "I would like that," Teresa said, relief flooding through her. She had been afraid he would leave and she would never see him again, that this unexpected connection would be lost. "I would like that very much." Something in Hayes's expression softened. "Teresa, I need to tell you something. I came to Yuma looking for work, yes, but also looking for a place to start over. I did not expect to find someone who understood what that meant. I did not expect to find you." Her heart hammered in her chest. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that helping you has helped me too. It has given me purpose again, reminded me that I can do some good in this world despite my past mistakes." Hayes took her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "I am saying that these past days with you have meant more to me than I know how to express properly. And I am saying that I would like to keep seeing you if you are amenable to that, not just on Sundays, as much as possible. Teresa felt tears spring to her eyes, but these were different, warm and bright. "I am very amenable to that," she said. "More than amenable. Hayes, you have given me back pieces of myself I thought were lost forever. You have made me believe that I can do this, that I can survive this grief and build something good anyway. I do not want to lose that. I do not want to lose you." "You will not," Hayes promised. He lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm, a gesture so tender that Teresa felt it all the way through her body. "I am not going anywhere." He started work at the Double H Ranch 3 days later, and true to his word, he came to visit every chance he could. On Sundays, they would take walks along the Colorado River that bordered Yuma, talking for hours. Hayes told her about the horses he was breaking, the ranch hands he worked with, the beauty of riding out across the desert at dawn. Teresa told him about improvements she was making to the store, about customers who had become regulars, about recipes she was trying from her mother's old cookbook. One Sunday in early August, 6 weeks after they met, Hayes brought Teresa out to the ranch to meet his employers, John and Margaret Henderson. Margaret was a warm woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a ready laugh, and she took to Teresa immediately, showing her the garden and the chickens and insisting she stay for dinner. Over a meal of roast chicken and potatoes, Teresa found herself relaxing in a way she had not around strangers since her father's death. "Hayes speaks of you constantly," Margaret said with a knowing smile. "It is Teresa this and Teresa that. I told John that boy is clearly smitten." Teresa blushed and glanced at Hayes, who looked slightly embarrassed but did not deny it. "She has been teaching me how to run a business properly," he said, "and how to make a decent apple pie. Among other things," Teresa added, meeting his eyes. They had grown closer each week, the connection between them deepening from friendship into something more profound. Hayes had kissed her for the first time the previous Sunday, a sweet, careful kiss under a cottonwood tree by the river, and Teresa had felt like she was flying. After dinner, Hayes took her outside to see the horses in the corral. The sun was setting, painting everything golden, and Hayes leaned against the fence rail beside her. "I have something to ask you," he said. "And you can say no, there is no pressure, but I have been thinking about it for a while now." Teresa's heart quickened. "What is it?" "The Hendersons have offered me a permanent position here. Good wages, a cabin on the property. It is the kind of steady work I have been looking for." Hayes turned to face her fully. "But before I accept, I need to know where we stand. Because if I take this job, I am putting down roots here. I am saying this is home, and I only want to do that if you are part of that home." Teresa could hardly breathe. "Hayes, are you saying—" "I am saying I love you," Hayes said, and his voice was steady and sure. "I know it has only been 6 weeks, and maybe that is too fast, but I know my own heart. I love you, Teresa Wright. I love your strength and your vulnerability, your determination to keep going even when it is hard. I love the way you laugh at my bad jokes and the way you concentrate when you are adding up figures. I love that you let me help put you back together, and that in the process, you helped put me back together too. I want to build a life here with you if you will have me." Tears streamed down Teresa's face, but she was smiling wider than she had in months. "I love you too," she said. "I have loved you for weeks now. I was afraid it was too soon, that I was being foolish, but I cannot help it. You are the best thing that has happened to me in the darkest time of my life. You are my light, Hayes." He pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, and Teresa kissed him back with all the emotion she had been holding inside. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Hayes rested his forehead against hers. "Will you marry me?" he asked. "Not right away if you are not ready, but someday soon. Will you be my wife?" "Yes," Teresa said without hesitation. "Yes, absolutely yes." Hayes laughed and picked her up, spinning her around while she clung to his shoulders, both of them grinning like fools. When he set her down, he pulled a small box from his pocket. "I bought this last week," he admitted. "I have been carrying it around, waiting for the right moment." Inside was a simple gold band with a small diamond, modest but beautiful. Hayes slipped it onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Teresa stared at it, marveling at how quickly her life had transformed. 3 months ago, she had been broken and alone. Now she was engaged to a man who loved her, who saw all her broken pieces and treasured them anyway. They married 6 weeks later, in September of 1884, in a simple ceremony at the small church in Yuma. Margaret Henderson stood up with Teresa, and John Henderson served as Hayes's best man. The whole town came, it seemed, filling the pews to witness Teresa Wright become Teresa Hayes. She wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved in a trunk, and carried wildflowers from the desert. When Hayes lifted her veil and saw her face, his eyes shone with tears. "You are so beautiful," he whispered, "inside and out." Teresa smiled at him through her own happy tears. "We fixed me together," she said softly, "just like you promised." "We fixed each other," Hayes corrected, and then he kissed her, and the whole church erupted in applause. They moved into the cabin at the Double H Ranch, a cozy 2-room structure that Hayes spent weeks making comfortable for his new bride. Teresa continued running the store during the week, hiring a young widow named Sarah Miller to help with daily operations. Sarah was grateful for the work, and Teresa was grateful for the company and assistance. It meant she could close early sometimes to ride out to the ranch, where Hayes would be waiting, always ready with a smile and open arms. Their first year of marriage was sweet and challenging in equal measure. Teresa still had hard days when grief would hit her unexpectedly, and Hayes had nightmares sometimes about his past failures. But they learned to lean on each other, to talk through the difficult emotions, to find comfort in each other's presence. They built a life together slowly and deliberately, founded on honesty and mutual support. In the spring of 1885, Teresa discovered she was pregnant. She told Hayes one evening after dinner, nervous about his reaction, but his face lit up like sunrise. "Are you serious?" he asked, and when she nodded, he swept her into his arms, laughing and crying at once. "We are going to have a baby. We are going to be parents. Are you happy?" Teresa asked, needing to hear it. "I am beyond happy," Hayes said. "Teresa, you have given me everything I never knew I needed. A home, a purpose, love, and now a child. I do not have words for how blessed I feel." Their son was born in December of 1885, a healthy baby with his father's gray eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him Thomas, after Teresa's father, and when Hayes held him for the first time, Teresa saw tears running down his face. "Hello, Tommy," Hayes said softly. "I am your papa, and I promise I will do everything in my power to keep you and your mama safe and happy." Motherhood suited Teresa in ways she had not expected. She had worried that she would be haunted by the memory of her own mother's death, but instead she found it healing. She told Tommy stories about his grandmother while she nursed him, keeping those memories alive. And watching Hayes with their son filled her heart to overflowing. He was a patient, gentle father, singing to Tommy, walking him around the cabin when he fussed, changing diapers without complaint. "You are wonderful at this," Teresa told him one night, watching him rock their son to sleep. "I had a good example," Hayes said. "My father was always there for us kids. I want to be that for Tommy and for any other children we are blessed with." They had 2 more children over the next 5 years. A daughter named Rebecca in 1887, with her mother's green eyes and sunny disposition, and another son named Henry in 1889, who looked exactly like Hayes but had Teresa's stubborn streak. The cabin grew crowded, and in 1890, Hayes and Teresa decided to build a house on a piece of land they purchased on the outskirts of Yuma, halfway between the town and the ranch. It was a large house by their standards, with 4 bedrooms and a real kitchen and a porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Hayes built it himself over the course of 6 months, with help from John Henderson and some of the ranch hands. Teresa designed the layout, incorporating things she had always dreamed of: a big kitchen for cooking and preserving, a parlor with windows facing east to catch the morning light, a study where she could manage the store's accounts. They moved in during the winter of 1890, and Teresa stood in the empty parlor with tears in her eyes. "I never imagined I could have this," she said to Hayes. "After my father died, I thought happiness was over for me. I thought I would just exist, going through the motions forever. And now look at this. Look at what we have built." Hayes wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You deserve all of this and more," he said. "You are the strongest person I know, Teresa. You took your broken pieces and made something beautiful." "We made something beautiful," Teresa corrected, turning in his arms to face him. "I could not have done any of this without you. You saved me, Hayes. You saved me right back," he said, and kissed her softly. The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. The store continued to thrive under Teresa's management, becoming one of the most successful businesses in Yuma. She expanded the inventory and started ordering specialty items from back east, building a reputation for quality and fair prices. Sarah Miller eventually married and left to start her own family, but Teresa found other reliable help, including a young Mexican woman named Rosa who had a gift for numbers and organization. Hayes continued working with horses, but he also started occasionally helping the local sheriff when situations required someone with law enforcement experience. He never took a formal position, still wary of that responsibility, but he would assist with difficult arrests or investigations. It helped him make peace with his past, proving to himself that his old skills could still be useful without the weight of a badge. By 1895, Tommy was 9 years old and already showing signs of his father's calm competence. Rebecca was 8 and had declared her intention to be a teacher like her grandmother. Henry was 6 and fearless, always climbing things he should not and coming home covered in dust and bruises. They were a loud, loving, chaotic family, and Teresa could not imagine life any other way. One evening in June of that year, Teresa and Hayes sat on their porch after the children were in bed, watching the stars come out over the desert. They did this often, cherishing these quiet moments together. Hayes reached over and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "Do you remember the day we met?" he asked. 11 years ago this month." "Of course," Teresa said. "You walked into my store looking for supplies and I had a breakdown in front of a complete stranger, very dignified of me." Hayes smiled. "I walked into that store thinking I was just passing through. I had no plans to stay in Yuma. But then I saw you, so obviously struggling, and something in me just knew I had to help. I did not understand it at the time, but looking back, I think some part of me recognized you. Recognized what you needed because it was what I needed too." Teresa squeezed his hand. "You told me we would fix me together, and you kept that promise. But Hayes, you did so much more than that. You did not just help me heal, you gave me a reason to heal. You gave me love and partnership and this beautiful family. You gave me everything." "You gave me everything too," Hayes said. "A home, a family, a reason to stop running and start building. I look at our life now, at these kids sleeping in their beds, at this house we built with our own hands, at 11 years of marriage and partnership, and I cannot believe how lucky I am." Teresa leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling utterly content. "Do you ever think about your partner?" "The one who died." "Sometimes," Hayes admitted. "But it does not hurt the way it used to. I have made peace with it as much as anyone can. I think he would be happy for me, seeing where I ended up. And I try to honor his memory by being the kind of man he believed I could be. A good husband. A good father. Someone who helps when help is needed." "You are all of those things and more," Teresa said. "Our children are so lucky to have you as a father. I am so lucky to have you as a husband." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, holding hands and watching the night sky. Teresa thought about the journey that had brought them here, all the pain and healing, the love and work that had built this life. She thought about her father and wished he could have met Hayes, could have seen her happy and thriving. She liked to think he would have approved. "Hayes," she said suddenly, "do you think we could go visit the cemetery tomorrow? I want to tell my father about how well things have turned out. I have not been in a while." "Of course," Hayes said immediately. "We can bring the children. They should know their grandfather's story, know what kind of man he was." The next day, the whole family visited the small cemetery on the edge of town. Teresa placed wildflowers on her father's grave and told her children about Thomas Wright, about his honesty and hard work, about how he had taught her everything she knew about running a business. Tommy listened solemnly. Rebecca picked additional wildflowers to add to the grave, and Henry tried to catch a lizard until Hayes gently redirected him. "Papa," Teresa said softly to the headstone, "I want you to know that I made it through. It was hard after you left, the hardest thing I have ever done. But I met someone who helped me find my way back. His name is Harrison Hayes, and he is a good man. You would have liked him. He takes care of me and the children, and we have built something beautiful together. The store is doing well. I am doing well. I hope you are proud of me." Hayes put his arm around her shoulders, and the children gathered close. They stood together for a long moment, a family united, honoring the man who had raised Teresa and taught her to be strong. As they walked back toward town, Tommy asked, "Mama, how did you and Papa meet?" Teresa and Hayes exchanged a look, and she smiled. "That is quite a story," she said. "It started on a very hard day, one of the hardest of my life. I was sad and lost, and then your papa walked into my store. He saw that I needed help, and instead of walking away, he stayed. He helped me fix what was broken inside me, and in the process, we fell in love." "That is romantic," Rebecca declared with the certainty of an 8-year-old. "It was," Teresa agreed. "It is. Your papa is my hero, and he always will be." Hayes ducked his head, embarrassed but pleased. "Your mama is my hero too," he told the children. "She is the strongest, bravest person I have ever known." That evening, after the children were asleep, Teresa and Hayes made love slowly and tenderly, reaffirming the bond between them. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Teresa felt profound gratitude wash over her. Her life had not turned out anything like she expected. She had experienced terrible loss, had been broken by grief, had believed she would never be whole again. But Hayes had appeared exactly when she needed him, and together they had built something extraordinary from the wreckage. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "Thank you for not walking away that day. Thank you for seeing me when I was at my worst and choosing to stay." "Always," Hayes murmured, pulling her closer. "I will always choose you, Teresa. Today, tomorrow, and every day after, you are my heart." The years continued to roll by, marked by birthdays and holidays, small dramas and great joys. Tommy grew into a serious young man who apprenticed at the store and showed a natural talent for business. Rebecca did indeed become a teacher, attending normal school in Phoenix and returning to Yuma to teach at the local schoolhouse. Henry decided ranching was his calling and went to work at the Double H, learning everything John Henderson could teach him about running cattle and horses. In 1905, 21 years after their wedding, Teresa and Hayes celebrated their anniversary with a quiet dinner at home. Their children were grown now, building their own lives, and the house felt strangely empty without them. But Teresa did not mind. She was 52 years old, Hayes was 46, and they had decades of memories behind them and hopefully many more years ahead. "We did well," Hayes said, raising his glass of wine to her across the table. "With the kids, I mean. They all turned out to be good people." "We did very well," Teresa agreed. "They are kind and hardworking and honest, everything we hoped they would be." She smiled at him over the rim of her own glass. "Remember when we were young and everything seemed so hard, when we were both so broken we could barely function?" "I remember," Hayes said. "But I also remember the moment I took your hand and promised we would fix you together. That was the moment my life changed. That was the moment I found my purpose." "My life changed that day too," Teresa said softly. "You were my salvation, Hayes. You still are. Every single day, you make me glad to be alive. You make me glad we fought through the hard times together. I cannot imagine my life without you in it." "You will never have to," Hayes promised, reaching across the table to take her hand, just as he had done 21 years ago in the back of a general store when a grief-stricken woman had confessed to being broken inside. "We are in this together, Teresa. Until the very end." They clinked their glasses together, and Teresa felt the same flutter in her chest that she had felt the first time Hayes smiled at her. After all these years, all these experiences, all the ways they had grown and changed together, he could still make her feel like a young woman falling in love. That, she thought, was the greatest gift of all. A few years later, Tommy married a schoolteacher named Emily, and they gave Teresa and Hayes their first grandchild, a daughter named Margaret after Mrs. Henderson, who had passed away the year before. Holding that tiny baby in her arms, Teresa was overwhelmed with emotion. "Hello, sweet girl," she whispered. "I am your grandmother, and I am going to tell you so many stories. About your great-grandfather Thomas, and about how your grandfather saved my life, and about all the love that went into making this family." Hayes stood beside her, looking down at the baby with wonder. "We are grandparents," he said, sounding amazed. "How did that happen?" "Time," Teresa said simply. "Beautiful, strange, merciful time." She looked up at her husband, at the silver threading through his dark hair, at the lines around his eyes from years of smiling. "I love you more now than I did on our wedding day," she told him. "I did not think that was possible, but it is true." "I feel the same way," Hayes said. "You are my best friend, my partner, my love. You always have been. You always will be." Rebecca married a doctor 2 years later and moved to Tucson, while Henry took over management of the Double H when John Henderson retired. The store continued to thrive under Tommy's management, and Teresa finally stepped back from daily operations, though she still kept her hand in the bookkeeping. She and Hayes had more time for themselves now, and they spent it traveling around Arizona, visiting their children and grandchildren, and simply enjoying each other's company. On a warm evening in June of 1914, exactly 30 years after the day they met, Teresa and Hayes sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. They were older now, moving slower, but still holding hands the way they always had. 30 years, Teresa said wonderingly. "It seems like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once." "Best 30 years of my life," Hayes said. "Every single day with you has been a gift, Teresa." She leaned against him, fitting perfectly into the curve of his shoulder after 3 decades of practice. Do you remember what you said to me that first day, when I told you I was broken inside? I said we would fix you together, Hayes replied. And we did. We fixed each other. We did more than that, Teresa said. We built an entire life together, a family, a legacy, all from that one moment of connection when you chose kindness instead of walking away. Hayes pressed a kiss to the top of her head. It was not a hard choice. The moment I saw you, I knew you were important. I knew you were going to change my life. I just had to stay long enough to find out how. Teresa turned her face up to his, and he kissed her properly, soft and sweet and full of 30 years of love. When they pulled apart, both smiling, she said, I hope we have another 30 years together. And then 30 more after that, Hayes agreed. I am not ready to be done loving you, Teresa Hayes. I do not think I ever will be. As the sun disappeared below the horizon, and the first stars began to appear, they sat together in comfortable silence. Two people who had been broken and had found healing in each other's arms. They had faced grief and loss, had struggled and strived, had built something beautiful from the ashes of their pain. And through it all, they had held on to each other, honoring that first promise made in a dusty general store in Yuma, Arizona, on a hot June day in 1884. They had fixed each other together, and in the process, they had created something unbreakable, a love that would endure whatever challenges came next, a partnership that would last all their days. A story that their children and grandchildren would tell for generations to come, about the cowboy who helped heal a broken woman, and the woman who gave him a reason to stop running and start living. About two damaged souls who found each other at exactly the right moment and built a lifetime of happiness together, one day, one moment, one choice at a time. They had taken brokenness and transformed it into beauty, taken despair and turned it into hope, taken loneliness and made it into family. And every single day for the rest of their long lives, they would wake up grateful for that first moment of connection, for Hayes's decision to stay, for Teresa's willingness to accept help, for the love that grew between them like wildflowers in the desert, beautiful and resilient and impossible to kill. That was their story, that was their legacy, and it was enough. It was more than enough, it was everything,